Welcome to Driven to Lead. I'm your host, Wayne Brandon. In this series, we explore the real world stories of key executives to find the leadership lessons that help move us all forward. If you like these conversations, we'd really appreciate it if you hit the subscribe and like button. It'll help us out a lot. But now we got another great program for you today, so let's make it happen. Well, we got a great program again today. We got Marti Nyman, who is the president and CEO of New Wave Design out of Eden Prairie, Minnesota. Marti is a servant leader. He's a CEO who builds vibrant, high-performance cultures. He's got a focus on developing people and making them reach their full potential and value. He's been a part of organic initiatives, merger and acquisition work, new ventures, brand repositioning. He spans 7 industries with leadership experience at organizations that include Fortune 50, NASDAQ, PE-backed, not-for-profit, and entrepreneurial organizations. Marti has successfully led teams and delivered results in the defense industry, telecom, energy, large-scale retail, private equity, professional services, healthcare sectors. Too much really to share with you as part of the introduction. Marti, welcome to the program.
Pleasure to be here, Wayne. Thanks so much.
Yeah, it's really great to have you. I love to have people from various sectors of the economy come in and talk about things. And you have such a broad spectrum of experience. I think it's going to be really great today to hear you talk about it. But if you would you start out by telling us a little bit about New Wave Design and what you all do, and what part of the defense industry are you in?
Absolutely. New Wave Design designs and develops and delivers technology to the armed services, principally for electronics processing, primarily on aircraft. So if you think of F-35s, F-22s, F-16s, but the same technology that goes into a jet fighter will also go into ground-based equipment like personnel carriers or attack vehicles, as well as on ships, on aircraft carriers. So generically, we provide critical technology that allows a mission computer on those aircraft, on those vehicles, on the ship-based systems, to be able to take signals in. And in this case, these are coming in at very high data rates. They're very big signals to process, and then needing to go on to the proper next use of the signal. So a good example, a lot of times on aircrafts, they've got multiple sensors throughout the aircraft. And those sensors are radar, they are RF or radio frequency sensors, all of which are critical for the pilot to be able to carry out their mission. So our technology sits right in the middle of the information coming off the sensors, getting processed, and then presented to the pilot or whatever systems are needed to execute on that information. As I like to say, I grew up in New England. I think it's wicked cool stuff. It's incredibly hard to do. Our company is exceptionally good at doing what we do, and we're proud of all the work that we do in providing this information.
Yeah, congratulations. That sounds like a critical element of things. So does any of the information feeds get processed at the edge, so to speak, in the aircraft or in the ship, or are you transmitting it back to a central cloud-based area and then transmitting the instructions or the information back, or both?
It's a good observation. Increasingly, because of the nature of what needs to be processed, more of the processing is going to the edge. So we will expect to be a part of that as these architectures evolve. But historically today, we sit in a box called a mission computer. And then the information where it's processed then gets distributed to the proper end users.
Yeah, that's what I've been involved in a little bit of the defense sector over the last few years as a consultant and a coach. And some of the things that are being done now at more central processing, command and control locations are moving to the edge as the computing capability is there. And it's just seems like it's so much more efficient than transmitting information, having a process, and then transferring it back in a real-time situation where you need information to make decisions and to operate what you're doing. So that's very, very interesting. Now, is this mission control box doing all types of data? You mentioned RF, you mentioned different sensors. So is it capable of managing multiple flows, and does it somehow integrate those multiple flows into information, or is there a broader modeling that goes on to use all those data to make a decision? I'm just curious about that.
These mission computing systems are getting increasingly more complex, simply because the um, the sensor loads that are being put on aircraft are
Mhm.
continuing to expand. The evolution of a new technology generally says we're able to sense something, so therefore we need to add that to the aircraft suite of sensors. A
Right.
simple example might be this. On a fighter, there's radar typically, but
Mhm.
so there will be radar receivers taking in that signal, processing it, and sending that to a display for the pilot. But increasingly, there's more cameras that are
Yeah.
located on these aircraft. So they're actually processing visual information, which then
Mhm.
gets sent to the cockpit. In a lot of cases, it's into the pilot's heads-up display, into the goggles that they
Right.
have. So
Right.
they're able to maintain visual contact with everything that's going on around them. So all of the different, I would say, the media that's coming into a mission computer is diverse. There's a lot of different types of
Yeah.
signals coming in that are being then distributed to the appropriate endpoints on the aircraft.
Right. Oh, that's amazing. And I guess that, like, from a radar, you're going to get point cloud information coming back digitally, and then you're going to probably be processing the photographic image, the video that's being taken, the visual, and then you have to somehow merge and manage those point clouds
Mhm.
to understand the orientation to make sense of the information. If you
Totally.
need both inputs working in tandem, right? So
Exactly.
really complex stuff and an interesting place to be a part of. We touched a little bit of this in autonomous vehicles, where you have radar, LiDAR, and cameras all working in tandem, and the complexity is beyond my technical capability, way beyond.
No,
But I
I was
like.
gonna, I'm listening to you pick all this up, and if you want a job, we'll hire you.
Great. Well, I would like to talk with you some more about this at another time, because there's some technologies that I'm touching right now that might be of interest to you, but that's a topic for another day. Tell me about you a little bit, Marty. I mean, did you think you'd be in the defense industry in such a complex technical area, or were you an engineer by training? How did this all come about?
So the answer is yes and maybe. I'm a mechanical engineer by trade. My
Hmm.
undergraduate degree is in mechanical engineering. Um, so naturally, if of all the industries I've been in, more than half of them have been technology based.
Hmm.
And one of the things I truly enjoy, I'm just biased towards this. I love the challenge of solving a problem with technology. And it's not technology first, it's problem first. What is it that we're trying to solve? And then what is the best technical solution to be able to address that problem cost effectively,
Hmm.
technically, and all the other things. So in general, I've always been drawn to industries that have a big problems that technology is likely to be the best solution. So,
Hmm.
but as an ME right now, a lot of what we do is in the electrical domain.
Right. Right.
So it's software, firmware, electrical engineering design, but there are mechanicals associated with what we do as well.
Yeah. Now, are you building any of the hardware, or is it mostly software that you're building?
It's hardware. What we deliver to our end customers is a hardware product.
Okay, with embedded software capabilities, I guess.
Correct.
And then you're doing real-time updates, I expect, via satellite or something else on the hardware from time
What
to
was interesting on these platforms,
time.
once you lock down that release of software, firmware capabilities, you kind of want to keep
Mhm.
it locked down. Um,
Okay.
in that when you do
So,
upgrades and you do what the industry typically refers to as tech refreshes,
yeah, yeah.
then you see all of the updates, all of the new changes being implemented to embedded computing devices such as what we deliver.
Yeah. Well, I wasn't thinking about the security aspects as well. In the military application, of course, the privacy and security kind of has to be taken to another level. So you probably wouldn't want a lot of over-the-air updates that would be,
Yeah.
available for others to
And,
sense.
and stability. You just need
Yeah.
to know that whatever new load you put on the
Hmm.
aircraft is going to work. So the
Yeah.
rigor that goes into making sure that everything, every line of code is
Yeah.
correct and delivers on the capabilities.
Yeah.
Have to
No, that
make sure
makes
that's right.
sense.
Otherwise, you have a
Probably.
pilot safety issue.
Yeah, and you got very heavy testing and validation that goes on for every one of
Yeah,
those.
well
Not
said. Yep.
that makes perfect sense. And so, are you a product of Minnesota, or where are you from originally?
I'm originally from Massachusetts.
Are you okay? So it's the work that took you out that way.
Always, always.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, I had the opportunity to travel around the world, work in 85 different countries. And as a kid from downriver Detroit, I would have never been in all those places if it wasn't for the
Yeah,
work taking me there.
yeah,
So, Marty, I appreciate that introduction, and everybody get a chance to understand a little bit about who you are and what you do. Clearly, a very complex industry and a very important piece of work. This program, as you know, is about leadership lessons, and we love to talk to key executives like yourself because you have a lot of stories that you might be able to share with us. Would you share a story, set it up for us, and let us kind of hear something that happened? It could be a great success or an abject failure. Doesn't matter. We'll see if we can teach some leadership lessons out of that as a primary part of our program today.
yeah. I'd love to. The first story that comes to mind is probably, and a lot of leaders probably would have similar stories, which is in 2019, I took a role as president and CEO of a industrial technology company. And this was a global firm. We had employees in 21 countries. We had customers in over 40 countries, as well as production facilities in 4 different physical locations, most in the US, but one was in the UK. I took the job in November of 2019, and everybody knows what happened the following year when COVID hit.
Yeah, right.
And I can distinctly remember from a leadership standpoint, when you've got a situation that is that significant, and every day you come into work, you're confronted with new variables because everyone was figuring it out. New information was being
Right.
made available on a
Right.
daily basis. And so to be able to be adaptive, to be able to be always incorporating this, what did we just learn today, and how does it affect us? How does it change how we're running the company? It was an incredible dynamic that we had to. So I had every morning at 8:30, my entire leadership team and our safety officer gathered for an update conversation. What are we learning? What has changed? What are anything new that we need to put in place? All the variables. So I don't think I've ever seen a number of external influences dramatically impacting a business. So, but everybody who was leading a company at the time was dealing with the same thing. But
Right.
what was particularly interesting was when everything locked down, as I mentioned, we had employees in 21 countries. Every country had a different protocol. And some were just locked down. You were not
Yeah,
going
of
anywhere.
course.
Others had limitations. So in addition to figuring out how do we continue to operate the business to serve our customers in this new environment, my primary concern as a leader of an organization is the welfare of the people. And so at the time, there was no simple way to do this, but I committed to speaking with every employee. We had about 300 employees. But I committed to speaking personally, one-to-one, with every employee in the country within
Wow.
over the period of 4 to 6 weeks. Part of it was just logistics. So I had my executive assistant queue up my morning to be full of calls to Europe, and
Mm-hmm.
some in the US, it would be the middle of the day, and then in the evening would be Asia, our colleagues that we had that worked in Asia. And
Mm-hmm.
the purpose was simple, just checking in. How are you doing? Because we
Mm-hmm.
don't know. We don't know what's happening with them
Sure.
personally, emotionally, psychologically, what's happening with their family. Is there anything that they need that they're not getting right now?
Mm-hmm.
And for me, it wasn't an option. It was one of the critical parts of what I believed I had to do in terms of effectively leading the company.
Yeah.
And I think there was a lot of good that came from it, not the least of which was for people to know that regardless of what's happening, that they matter, that this is certainly their job, but more importantly, that they matter as people, and we care more
Right.
deeply about them and their own personal situations, and the business stuff will get figured out. So we got through COVID. We made the adjustments. It wasn't easy. We were constantly looking at the world economic, all of the models,
Sure.
all of the indices that were telling us how down is down and when can we
Right.
expect to see
Right.
things turn around. But there was just so much that we learned, and so much that I learned, and I grew as a leader. But it was probably one of the more challenging situations I've ever dealt with.
Yeah, it was for everybody. So no, that's a really interesting story, and it's so insightful on your part to realize that if the employees could hear from you personally and have a conversation with you, that they would have a sense of ownership in the company, a sense of future that sometimes was very, uncertain at that point in time, obviously. And boy, you just can't put a price tag on the value of showing people that you care about them. It's so important as a leader. I mean, we talk about servant leadership all the time, but certainly that's a key element, what you did
Mhm.
there. Now, did you end up talking about the business a little bit once you got past the personal side and let them know they matter, let them know you care? Did you have some business conversations as well during those calls?
It depended. Some of them were,
Yeah.
and inevitably, if we had colleagues in India, I would ask them,
Mm-hmm.
"Are you able to get out to see customers?
Yeah. Yeah.
What are the restrictions that you're experiencing, and are you able
Mm-hmm.
to? And if you're
Yeah.
not able to physically be there, how are you able to reach out to them? Are you finding the ability to make sure you're tracking with what they need? Because remember, our customers, whom we sold our technology to, they
Mm-hmm.
still had a business to run. And our
Absolutely.
technology was vital to them to continue to
Yeah.
stay online in the new operating conditions.
Yeah. What was it? What was the product in general, or the product category?
It was measurement and control technology. So
Okay.
pick your favorite process. If you're making saran wrap, if you're making Doritos,
Mm-hmm.
there's measurement equipment that ensures that critical attributes of the
Right.
product are
Right.
maintained as it's produced. And
Yeah.
we were the technology that maintained that.
No, that's fantastic. So you were doing calibration, validation work on the equipment. Sounds perfect. Yeah. So you had to have a physical presence in your clients, a place of business typically, because I assume the equipment was there and it
Mhm.
couldn't be monitored completely remotely. So you had to be on site in some cases.
We did. We had to be
Yeah.
on site for new installs,
Yeah. Of course.
and we
Yeah.
had to be on site for any kind of scheduled maintenance or updates.
Right.
But
Yeah.
our customers also, this is an example where, a dynamic such as COVID drives sometimes changes in operating practices.
Yeah.
They were keen to understand how much can we remote into your technology? Can we get a
Mhm.
remote dial in to be able to
Yeah.
get, if we need to calibrate one of the sensors, can we do it
Mhm.
remotely as opposed to having to send somebody into the factory?
Sure. Sure. So let me ask a question about that specifically. So during COVID, because these things were asking you, I mean, the situation was asking you, your clients were asking you if you could do some things remotely. Did you actually discover that you can do some things remotely you were doing physically before and maybe get more efficient in some of your process as a result of the problematic situation you're in?
Some of the products did have built-in connectivity.
Okay.
So what we learned was, is it sufficient? Are they able
Mhm.
to get what they need? Or do we need to make any enhancements to that? Are there additional parameters that they want to calibrate? Some of the other products just didn't have any communications capability, so it was what it was. We couldn't change any of that.
And so have you added communications capability some of those products? Or I know you're in a different business now, but do you think they've added connectivity so there's more remote capabilities actually possible?
I would imagine that there are. It's all
Interesting.
part of the connected factory. So the
Yeah.
comms, the ability to get in access to these gauges is a big part of the wireless factory, being able to connect everything into one network.
So in the post-COVID uh, months, when your business was starting to flow again, getting back toward normal, um, what did you experience with the team, given that you had taken this action to contact all of them, make sure their needs were met? Did you see that there was a different cultural kind of dynamic in the company? Was it something that helped you to be more successful going forward?
I would say the answer is yes. It's sometimes difficult to, how do you quantify that?
Yeah, exactly.
One of the metrics that I certainly will look at within any organization that I'm working at is, are people leaving the company? Are they staying
Yeah,
or are
what's the
they
churn
leaving?
rate? Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was one of the things I carefully monitored. And I would say that coming out of post-COVID, I think we had a very, very low attrition rate.
Hmm.
And, rightfully so, someone can challenge me, was that because of the work that we did during COVID or something else? I'd like to believe, and I operate under this notion that inevitably, if people want to belong to something, they want to belong. And granted, it's a form of employment, it's a form of income. But deep down, one of the fundamental needs that we all have is we want to feel like we belong to something.
Absolutely.
And when it comes to an organization, when you can create an environment where people generally felt valued, when they are challenged and they grow and they're treated with respect,
Mhm.
um, generally that tends to contribute to an environment where there's a strong sense of connectivity, as well as they feel like they belong here.
Right. And I expect that you already had some core values that were a key part of your culture. And so you're truly caring for them and following up and making sure everybody's okay, making sure they know they matter, was consistent with what you had already communicated was important to the
Mhm.
company.
Yeah,
But a lot of companies say their people are the most important asset, but they don't really act that way. And I
yeah,
expect you were already acting that way. So this was really just an acceleration of the reality that this is true.
yeah. And the same is true for value statements. Most companies have, well, here's what our values are. And
Right,
I don't know if it's a crisis that really tests whether those are truly lived out or whether they're even lived out today. Personally, I always challenge any organization, truly, if we're going to take the time to articulate what our values are, let's number one,
mm-hmm.
make sure they're the right ones. And
Yeah.
then if we agree that these are the values that we all want to share, how do we live them out? I think it's one
Mm-hmm.
of the greatest challenges. How do you put it into concrete, actionable practices at a leadership level, at an operating level, at a functioning team level? And I think it's one of the rewarding challenges is, can you make your values meaningful and can you
Yeah.
make them real?
Yeah, there's a few elements there, and I'm sure you know as well. But the one of the things is not have 20, even though you could have 20 and they could all be
Mhm.
valid, but have a smaller number that people can really grasp and articulate for the whole organization and for each other and for their daily activities. But the other thing is just to continue to reinforce them. You are reinforcing them with your phone calls, but you can reinforce that by awards that people get for doing things. You can have spontaneous bonuses that can happen for someone who exhibits the value in a real powerful way, and you can have just public recognition within the company. That's worked really well sometimes, just to call someone up in a staff meeting and point out something they did that was a heroic act relative to the company's values and relative to the way they handled a tough situation. I want to go back to something you said that I thought was very insightful, though. And you said that does it take a crisis before you really understand whether your values have taken hold or not? And that's really so true. It's really interesting to take a look at that. We don't judge ourselves by how many people say they would, let someone else go in front of them if the plane was on fire and and people were trying to
Mhm.
get out. You judge people by what they actually do. And I think, there are relatively few heroes in our world if you really looked at actions, but that's why we admire the ones that actually are, that will put the needs of others ahead of their own needs. It's something that we admire and wish we all had as part of who we are. I think we like to believe we do, but we don't necessarily behave that way. And it could be as simple as having a conflict with another employee over a project, and whether you let your emotions get the best of you and you have
Mhm.
you get off track with the objective discussion of a key business issue, and you let your little ego get bruised, or you somehow want to take vengeance against someone or have a unforgiveness toward another employee. So important that we see how we all manage through crisis and test our own corporate values during those times. So it's very insightful on your part
Yeah,
there.
I like what you said. I'll reinforce it that I stole everything I use my leadership I've stolen. So just be clear about that. But
Yeah, me too.
there's there is there's a statement that says it well, and that is adversity doesn't build character, it reveals it.
It reveals it.
And when I think
Absolutely.
about organizations and the character of an organization, and values and character in this context are
Mm-hmm.
somewhat interconnected.
Mm-hmm.
I really looked at, what is the adversity? And remember, adversity shows up in so many different forms. It could be a down market. It
Yeah,
could be
absolutely.
a disintermediation from a competitor.
Yeah.
What I look for is how are we responding to that? And I don't take a heroic view. I take, let's be clear about what we're made of and how do we respond to it and how do we reinforce that. And I shared this with all of our employees at New Wave earlier this year when we all got together in all employee gathering. In reflecting on 2025, I said, it was a challenging year to be sure. But what I also reinforced was the fact that it revealed the character of who we are. And I want to reinforce that.
Good for you. I think that's tremendous. Yeah, it doesn't have to be COVID or a war or something as dramatic as that. It could be just a downturn in the economy. Maybe it's not even something that you did or your competitors did. It could just be a general downturn. And as a result, there needs to be staff reductions. And as a result, it can throw the company into kind of a crisis mindset. You have to be a little bit more draconian than you'd like to be with some of the
Mhm.
cuts that need to be made or whatever. And it can put a lot of fear into the employees that need to manage through that. That reminds me. I mean, as we're going forward, a lot of companies are, getting that kind of pressure from some positions being threatened by AI right now, and we see a lot of transition in a lot of elements of the company that can be done faster, cheaper, better by technology. And I believe that's going to continue. It'll be, a continual road we're on relative to that. And I just wonder how you're looking at that and how you keep employees motivated and positive when there's some threat that's on the horizon for all of us.
I think everyone should be well aware of where does AI show up in your particular industry and your business and what's the impact going to be. It's no longer avoidable. So to your point, I break it out when I look at and when I've asked this question of the staff, I break it out into two domains. One is when we look at the impact of AI, it impacts on how we do the work. And then the other impact is on what we do for the work. And both are worth, making sure that we are actively exploring this. On how we do the work, I'm very bullish on the fact that I think AI tools are going to help us to be more productive. What we do is very specialized. So I'm not, as opposed to, marketing firms, even law firms are they're seeing their whole entry level strata of their organizations really get impacted by AI.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
what we do is highly specialized. It's very difficult to do. So we will not walk in tomorrow and find out that we've been replaced by an AI bot.
Mm.
But I do expect, and I challenged my team to be looking at how do we leverage AI to do the work more productively. I like the notion of a speed dividend. We should be able to cut our development cycles considerably if we're using the
Mm.
right tools. Since we
Sure.
work in the defense industry, we've got to be careful. So we manage very technical information and much of it is confidential. So we've got to be
Mm.
really smart about that.
Yeah.
What we deliver is we are, actively following what our customers are doing in terms of how does AI start showing up on a jet fighter or on a
Mm.
uncrewed aerial vehicle. And
Yeah.
it's going to happen. It's happening fast. What we get to be a part of is the hardware that delivers that. So the algorithms, for example, that are going to be delivering AI payloads are likely going to be sitting on some of our cards.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. That's a good response. Good answer. Marty, it's been fascinating to talk about this, and I really honor the approach that you're taking with your company and the actions you took during COVID. I think were just kind of really illustrative of the kind of leader you are. So thanks for that very much. I'd like to ask a couple of questions before we wrap up a conversation. And one of them would be, now that you've got a few decades of leadership under your belt, won't say how many, but let's just say we rewind 20 or so years, maybe a little bit more, when you were a younger man. What advice would you give yourself today if you could give one piece of advice?
You sure going to limit it to just one?
Okay, two if you have to.
All right, yeah, I'll be quick. One would be really amplify the power of curiosity in your life.
Mhm.
Yeah, I just think so many good things happen when you're innately curious.
Yeah.
And that is on every level. That's vocationally, that's how you do the work, but also as a leader. No one likes to be working for someone who claims to know everything. And I find as I've gotten older, I've continued to grow on my leadership journey, is getting more comfortable with not knowing the answer. So I love amplify curiosity. The other is this whole notion of be true to yourself in terms of your leadership style. A couple times in my career, and I'm sure you probably experienced something similar, you look at someone else, whether it's in another industry who's maybe a high profile leader, and say, I want to be like that person. Well, you're not that person. You got to be yourself. You were made uniquely to be just who you are. Be true to
And
that and know what you are, who you are as a leader. Don't try to be somebody you're not. And I think that's it's a mistake. That is, you're always vulnerable, but I would give myself that advice.
yeah, I think it goes along with both of those pieces of advice that you need to be comfortable enough with yourself that to say you don't know, and you need to make sure that you have this unique blend as you grow of humility and confidence. I think there's a place kind of in between those two extremes that allows you to represent who you are and do it well and add a tremendous amount of value. So I think that's great. Well said. All right. So now we're going to fast forward in the other direction time wise. And you and I are having a beer 20 years from now. And we're talking about our lives and our careers. What are you going to tell me you're most proud of?
Impact. And as I look at, the breadth of the organizations I've worked at, the things that I've been able to, and I've been very blessed to do, the thing that really is most meaningful to me is going to be impact. And that's on so many different fronts. The first most obvious one is people.
Mm-hmm.
When we're sitting there talking, I want to know that I made a difference in some people's lives, a meaningful difference. Whether they ever come forward and say anything is secondary. What I want to know is, did I make someone's life better as a result of me being in the role that I was in?
Mm-hmm.
Additionally, what I'm also proud would be looking back on is say, was by my being there in that organization, did it create an impact that would not have otherwise happened? And did I play a role in that? And this isn't about, self-aggrandizement. This is about you come to a role to make a difference, to have an impact. And I think those are probably the things that I'm going to look back and say, okay, it wasn't easy, it was
Yeah.
hard, but we did
Yeah.
make a difference.
Yeah. Well, I talk to hundreds of people in the work that I do, and part of it this podcast, and I would say that it's absolutely true that everyone wants to create value in the world. I'm just interpreting the way you say to create impact, or wherever that value comes. Could be with people, could be with the business, could be just maybe innovating or whatever the case may be. And the way I like to look at it is when we add value in the world, that value comes back to us and our families in one way or another. That's just the way the world works. It seems like the law of reciprocity is alive and well.
Mm-hmm.
As I mentioned earlier, I had the opportunity to travel around the world and work in 85 different countries and different cultures. And that was one of the questions I used to ask is, do you guys embrace the idea of reciprocity in your culture? Sometimes they didn't know what the word reciprocity meant in English, but
Mm-hmm.
I say, what goes around comes around, kind of the karmic effect, or, you reap what you sow, or however you describe it. And 98%, I think I only had one guy one time said that he didn't believe in that. But literally, it's a pervasive concept. I think we know as humans that when
Mm-hmm.
we do something to create an impact, as you phrased it, that there's something good there that happens, and it will come back to you and your family and others in ways that you can't even describe. And then on your first point about touching other people in a positive way, I think that's really more about what life is about, what being a leader is about than anything else. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, you're not doing it for yourself, you're doing it for them, and it doesn't matter if they ever call you, but boy, when they call you, it feels awfully nice.
Mm-hmm.
I get a call every now and again from some of the people who were part of my team when I was a CEO running large businesses, and it's so rewarding because at the end of the day, you really do care about them. You really care about them. That's why you make those calls, to make sure they're okay during a time like COVID. And to have them recognize that you personally really connected with them. And I like to say that you care as much about, the clothes their kids wear to school next season as they do. And when they know that, they'll run through walls for you as well. So business performance goes up, harmony in the team, all the core values that you're projecting forward seem to mesh a little bit more effectively.
Mm-hmm.
So I think very, 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 very happy to hear you say those things, Marty. Thanks. It's been great having you on the program. I love having conversations with smart people who are so successful in the world, and I know the audience likes to hear from it as well. If someone wanted to get in touch with you to follow up or with your company, what would they do?
My email address would be probably the best way to get in connection with me. Probably put it in the link when you post the podcast.
Yep, we'll do. Yeah, we'll do that. We'll put it in there. And in the meantime, we'll try to keep in touch and stay current with what's happening at New Wave Design. It's very nice to have you on the program today. Thank you very, very much, Marty.
Wayne, it's been a pleasure. I'm grateful for the opportunity to talk with you.
All the best, and God bless.
And you as well.
Well, that's it for Driven to Lead today. We really appreciate you being with us. Share this with a friend or a business colleague if you would. And if I could remind you again, please hit the like and subscribe buttons. We're very grateful for that. So until next time, always remember, the high road leads to a better place.